Thank you guys so much for coming. Really excited to sit down with this incredible panel and talk all things embedded fintech, the future of payments, money, all that good stuff. So to start, would love to get introductions from all of our amazing panelists.
Hello everyone, Kara Hayward, Director of Partnerships for Currency Cloud, a Visa solution. We are a global embedded fintech platform that supports our customers in building a sort of global payments and foreign exchange platform. So nice to be here.
Hello. Cold Steele, I'm the CEO, co-founder of Route Fusion. Route Fusion, we describe it as a global product expansion platform. So effectively, we help people open bank accounts in a bunch of different countries around the world, connect them to local payment systems, do the FX, and then obviously, like where the money's made on the hedging, we'll step in and have fun there. And all of that's, for individual, corporate treasury, or embedded for people to build their companies on top of.
And I'm Larry Talley, founder of Everywhere. Everywhere is locally here formed in Austin, Texas. Moved the company here back in 2018. Everywhere is really known for its pay by mobile rail. And pay by mobile meaning that you simply can pay someone with your mobile phone number and also collect money using your mobile phone number. So we think it's the way of the future. We simplify payments, simplify collections, and solve problems. We like to think in 140 characters or less, since you can actually text back.
Nice. Thanks. So Larry, maybe we'll start with you. I'll go to you next, Colton. But for both of you, starting your companies, what was the main problem you kind of set out to solve?
Yeah, not being in the payment industry, at the time I really wasn't set out to solve problems around payments. I just happened to be in the hotel space. And in the hotel space, primarily the focus there was about getting both people to actually do something, right? And I learned that early on, if I could use real phone numbers and send you a text message and come from a hotel where you're about to stay at, I could pretty much get you to do whatever I needed you to do. Whether it's to go to my restaurant that I was getting residuals or compensation from, or it was for using it for customer service. We would tie in AI or bot technology to that. And then ultimately, it was through that problem solving of reducing chargebacks and mitigating risk and problem solving that I felt like, man, this could just work everywhere, hence the name. And at the time, it was just really looking at a combination of two companies, and I felt like what those two companies would look like if they had a baby. Those two companies were Twilio and Stripe. Oddly enough, I feel like Everywhere was born based on taking those two companies, the best use cases from them, and applying them to a different mindset, really built around like a concierge mindset. And that's really my travel background. If you ever stay at a Hilton Hotels, you still get a text message today. That was the first version. I wrote that over 15 years ago. And wound up selling that company back in 2016. Yeah, not running.
Wait, so are you in Four Seasons? Because when I stayed there this year, we texted them for more towels. Was that you?
Yeah, so anything to do within the hotel space early on, I gave it a friendly name like Ivy. Everyone loved Ivy, but Ivy was like a bot in the middle of nowhere.
That's awesome. Cool, what about you?
So we started Route Fusion sort of on accident. Initially, we were building a neobank back in 2016, and one of our customers wanted to move money to Guatemala, so we were like, let's figure this out. What we found was, in the FX space specifically, there was no single provider that was the best, and we realized really quickly that we were going to have to integrate with a bunch of different providers to service all the different corridors we wanted, to get the best rates, to do all of those things. So my co-founder are both engineers, and like some people say, like, oh yeah, you should be an engineer to start a company, yada yada yada. It's actually the worst thing ever, because we saw it as like this opportunity to be like very macro and be the single source. We'll integrate with everybody, and then we're the default FX provider or whatever. But we weren't really sure like how big the market was, yada yada yada. Fast forward, we obviously play in FX a lot now, but we're also working with a bunch of different banks in a few different countries in Latin America and Europe, doing the hedging, the accounts, and the connection to the local payment systems. But what was the question again?
The problem you said.
Yeah, so the problem, I guess, was we solved our own frustration of we don't want to do a lot of API integrations, and we don't think other people are going to want to do those either. So yeah.
Thanks. So something Kara and I were talking about yesterday was how I think the old way was very land and expand. You know, start your company in the US, win that market, and then think about where you want to go next, whether that's other English-speaking countries like Canada, England, or Australia, or maybe then move to Latin America. But now, Kara, you shared with me a little bit about what Andreessen was talking about in this concept of default global. So what does that really mean? And how could a company like Currency Cloud help with something like that?
Great question, thank you. So I think if you look at a lot of the companies, again, that are started here in the US, they think, okay, well, it's the biggest market in the world. There's so much to go around in terms of a market to tap into here. But, and yeah, you know, maybe 3-5 years from now, we'll think about expansion. And both expansion in terms of servicing customers in other countries, but also servicing our customers in the US that have ties to the global economy. And so I think the problem that we've started to see is that 3 to 5 years for some companies is now here. And now they're looking at, okay, oh my gosh, as I'm expanding to another country, I have to have a better understanding of the entire infrastructure, compliance, regulation in this other country, or even just tacking on some global services to better service your customer base and set yourself apart. And tacking that on later is a really difficult proposal. And so I think what they were really trying to get at is start thinking sooner than later how you can embed a global mindset into your business model and be thinking of that early. And when you're assessing vendors or other partners, have an understanding of can they support that for future growth for you so that you don't have switching costs later. So I think that's sort of the theme and happy to chat more about that in detail.
Anything to add?
So I'm not gonna like shit on A16 or anything, but we definitely called out the whole global first thing a while ago, and I would say like Kara and I both probably were talking about it. But no, the thing that we say is Route Fusion and Currency Cloud. The way that I see it is the services that we're providing are services that have typically been catered mostly towards the Fortune 100 for people like Citi or Goldman or B of A or Chase. Like they'll roll out the red carpet, they'll do all the things for you as you want to expand globally. Typically it's a publicly traded company, like you've got a bunch of cash. And yeah, of course, like we want to be there. Currency Cloud, you know, with Visa, you guys are probably already there with those guys. But for the smaller guy that wants to expand globally and realize future revenue potentials now rather than in the future, if that makes sense. They can use a platform like Route Fusion. They can use a platform like Currency Cloud to access what has strictly been hidden for the Fortune 100, Fortune 500.
And I think just to add on that too, it's funny, you would think that these tier 1 companies have it down pat, and they really don't actually. It's like global money movement is really, really complicated, and I think most people in this room probably know that, but and it's extremely manual, right? And so I think really at the end of the day, it's taking some of those building blocks and making it scalable and repeatable so that our customers can focus on the thing that really matters, which is their customers, right? And making that experience better for them and not having to go recreate the wheel by like every single person that has a global need tapping into the same local payment rails or same FX capability. So almost, it really at the end of the day, it's sort of like the whole value prop of banking as a service, like the units of the world, but making it global.
Anything else?
I would just say from, my perspective, especially as an entrepreneur, when you're building on these systems, it's tough to think globally because you're like, how do I solve like taxes? How do I get out of taxes? We start there. But, it's such an important piece of the puzzle because ultimately when you go out to raise money, you start thinking about how you're going to spend that money, you got to have a plan. And that plan, if you don't have a global plan, I think that you're just really going to set yourself backwards when it comes time to actually raise money, especially when you get to past your Series A. I think in the seed stage you're okay, but when you get past the Series A and you go into your Series B, you start getting the big boy checks, I think you really got to think about how do you apply this to a global mindset, and that's really key. In my mind, and where things are headed with our product, from the very beginning was, okay, I know it might be 2 or 3 years out, but I have to get it in our infrastructure today. And a lot of those programs, if you start looking at vendors, we partnered up with Visa, like programs that like push the card, and it gave us the ability to reach almost 300 countries and have that infrastructure in place, and you can just turn it on when the switch is ready, when we're ready to actually expand in that country.
So I want to ask you all a little bit about how this shift can kind of enable like new use cases globally. I feel like FinTech 1.0 was kind of everybody wants to be a neobank. It's all about money. It's just about finances. And most of these companies that were FinTechs were like, we are a FinTech. But now I feel like with all of the products that you're talking about, texting for towels, right? Like that's not a FinTech classic use case, but this FinTech 2.0 has kind of allowed huge vertical SaaS companies or large enterprises that would never brand themselves as a FinTech to embed some of these products and capabilities. So I'm curious, any examples you're comfortable sharing or new verticals that you've seen unlocked by this?
Yeah, I'll throw one out there. Really it comes down to, for us, like we experienced it in the automotive space. In other words, like there's a lot more vehicles being purchased here in the U.S. and sent overseas, or purchased overseas and sent to the U.S. And if you think about that, you want money to move fast, but you also want it to be secure. So with our scenarios that we've gone through, we really tied in identity as part of the real-time money movement experience to show that, okay, not only can we move money fast, in other words, like globally, like using a partner like Visa, but we can also slow it down if we need to by using identity as a way. And it's basically just two-factor authentication, not just going off of somebody's credit card number, especially when you're moving money overseas, because obviously there's a lot of bad actors out there.
I think that the key theme is like it's meeting people where they are, right? Like payments is not sexy. Like, sorry, I love it. I'm a geek of payments, but no one's sitting there like, ooh, like how is my payment going to go through? It's like no, like what do I need to actually get done right now? And awesome, the money moved and it was painless, right? And I think that's the key thing about embedded finance is looking at all of the current processes. Doesn't matter what industry, where the payment is a pain in the butt, where it's separated from the customer experience of whatever it is that you're trying to do. And I mean, I think like travel is a great example, and like hotels. Like I love. We should chat after actually. 'Cause I'd love to pick your brain more, but yeah, I think that's an interesting spot. Like I think healthcare is in an interesting place, but but I have to quickly just thank the neobanks. Like thank you for pushing innovation because I think it was really important, but I think that the future of what else can be there is, it's just the beginning of what we're going to see. So I think the key thing is we just need to figure out the monetization. I know you're going to get to it. I'm not trying to push that next, but like how do we actually monetize these things? And I think that's the thing that we still have to figure out as an industry, but I'm excited to see where it goes.
I think one of the coolest things that we've been seeing is it's a really big push Latin America to the U.S. So that, just broadly speaking, that corridor, whether it's for investment purposes, whether it's to like hedge their currency risk in Argentina and have a U.S. dollar bank account, that little piece is spurring up all sorts of really interesting companies that are growing like very fast. So I'd say like this idea of like global first, like we're sort of talking about it from the perspective of like U.S. outward, but in reality, like it's like LATAM to the U.S. or all of a sudden like why is Brazil and Nigeria like they've created this really interesting new economy for whatever reason. Anyways, those are the cool things that we're seeing.
We're actually seeing that too. So I think another interesting one too is connecting. I call it global citizens, right? So people who have recently immigrated or constantly are traveling between multiple countries. Like it's generally very expensive and difficult to access multiple bank accounts across the different countries, and so using a lot of the open banking initiatives that are out there, how can you instantly move money between global accounts and have better access to your money? So that's another cool theme that we're seeing too.
So I'm going to take your foray into the monetization question, because why not? If we're going there, let's go there. This is definitely something we think about at Unit every day, especially because we're pretty early. But would love to hear, from you all that as a challenge and really any other challenges, right? Because so far you're talking about all the great stuff about what it enables and how it works, but what are some of those difficulties and headwinds that you might be facing?
So I think thinking global is actually an opportunity, right? To face the headwinds that we have around monetization for embedded finance. I think of the past 2-3 years, so much money flowing into the industry. I think it was really all about customer acquisition, and monetization's a tomorrow problem. But I think we all kind of knew in the back of our heads that splitting interchange with 3 different parties that was based on a regulatory thing that could change any day is not a long-term business model. So having to diversify those revenue models is super important now, and I think that's how you're going to raise money, is if you come with a good business plan, not just a way to get a bunch of users, right? So I think from a going global perspective, I mean, people don't talk about it enough, but there's a lot of money in FX, and yes, there's some debate, which I believe there needs to be some transparency and consolidation in that, but it's still a great money-making ability. And again, as you're diversifying more product lines, you have the ability to face the headwinds with any specific product line that might have regulatory changes or things like that. So that's, I think, on the monetization piece. And I forget, there's another point, but I'll forward it along and think about it.
So from a monetization perspective, moving away from interchange. So interchange, one of my advisors advised us a long time ago said, in the startup world, just make sure you don't get addicted to the crack. And that was interchange. Interchange was good fucking crack. And so we never actually participated in it. And we're always sort of on the sidelines, working on the FX, the transactional revenue piece, and just broadly speaking, platform revenue. But outside of interchange, I know some people are in interest-bearing accounts, but if you start looking at how to build your business, if you're already doing payments, or if you're wanting to expand into some form of payments, whether you're a marketplace, a text message for towels, whatever it may be. Sorry, I know it's not really a text message for towels, but that's such a good name. The transactional piece of it, so whether that's maybe you're going to take $1 off of every payment sent through your platform, maybe you're going to take 5 basis points off of every FX transaction that you've done through your international marketplace, or a revenue split, whatever it is. There's a lot of really cool ways to make money. And I'm happy sort of that interchange is going away, because now more people are wanting to find other ways to diversify, so it sort of helps us out. But yeah, that's my thing.
Do you think interest is the new crack?
I think interest is, I don't know. I don't play in it, so if I was a bank, maybe.
Yeah, I like to think about interchange as almost like a race to the bottom, right? In other words, didn't come from the payment industry, so I never really understood, basis points. I just knew percentages. I want to make 4%, not 4 basis points, right? And and a lot of times you see the average payment processor probably makes 15 or 20 basis points, not a lot of money, right? But with a different mindset of just solving the problem, you can actually accomplish a lot more. So for instance, with Everywhere's platform, this case where we don't charge really any processing fees, and we simply charge a SaaS fee. And that SaaS fee is a monthly fee that they pay, because we know that small businesses on average spend about $83 a month per merchant account. So if we can at least get over $83, we know that we've covered this ourselves. And then actually made money. So we actually sell the platform for $199. We know that we pretty much doubled our average money that we would make on a small business merchant account. So again, looking at use cases like that, or getting paid faster. It's about convenience. You're willing to pay more. I pay more on Lyft for a car that's going to be here in 1 minute versus 10 minutes. So if you think about money movement, I'll pay more money for money to show up my bank account in seconds versus days.
Yeah,
So things like that.
1% on Venmo to get my cash.
Right. And I had no problem with that. But if I sit there right now with a business owner trying to negotiate a plan around rates, then the whole conversation and agreement is based around a rate and not around the problem that you're actually solving for.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm allowed to say that interest is the new crack, but but it is a short-term fix, right? I think it's something you can make money off of short-term, but most founders are, I mean, although you are wrapped up in the day-to-day, you are trying to build a sustainable business over time. So yes, like utilize interest where you can for now, but like that shouldn't be the only thing we're relying on. Just the way that interchange shouldn't have been the only thing we were relying on at that time. And so I think again, and whether if that is what you're making money off of today, that's okay. So we understand it takes a lot to build a business, but have that business plan, have that 2, 3, 4-year plan of like this is how we're going to expand and have that sustainability. So
Thank you. So I have a couple more questions, but wanted to just poll the audience. If you have any, feel free to put your hand up now, or you can ask us at the end. But we've got some really great speakers up here, so I want to make sure you're getting the questions you have answered. And I'll circle back. One of my final questions for you all would be, it's a new year. There's a lot that's already happened already and a lot to come. What are some of the growth areas that you're focused on for 2023? Are there new products that you're building, new markets that you're targeting, new use cases? Excited to hear what you're all thinking about.
well, mine's a bit unique. So we were acquired by Visa just about a year ago. So that's sort of the big focus for us at the moment is how do we take what we've built as a fintech and find the synergies with a larger Visa organization. Visa has a lot of money movement capabilities and finding the way to provide that value across the chain. So that's what I'm personally focused on over the next couple of years. But there's a lot of exciting opportunity, and I think LATAM is definitely a really, really interesting space to be looking at the moment as well. So.
If I was a proper competitor, I would let Kara know that we are only focusing on Canadian MSBs. No, we're focused on the same thing that we've always been focused on, which is expanding our network. So adding as many different banks as we possibly can, as many different FX providers, and the connection into local payment systems wherever we possibly can, and in any means that we can do it. But yeah, and then with that, from the perspective of like ICP, sort of like I said, everyone in this room could use those services. We're mostly focused on marketplaces and maybe you could say neobanks. Not really. More like companies that used to rely heavily actually on interest revenue, but because of rates, interest revenue for their business isn't as interesting because they're not loaning as much money. And so now they're looking for areas where they want to diversify revenue with FX or transactional or some form like that.
And for us, I would say that really it's in two parts. The first part being that we've done a great job collecting probably about over a few billion already through our Pay by Text platform. That really was available only for merchant accounts. You had to have a merchant account, meaning that you had to be a business in order to get this account. Whereas, we always saw it as, well, every consumer and individual should have the same ability. So more or less looking at everywhere as the utilization for peer-to-peer. So person to person, you simply send money from one phone number to the next. And the great thing about it, it has that identity layer built into it. So in other words, you give us your phone number, we can actually provide you back your social, how much money you make, and which is pretty scary to think about. But ultimately, what we've done is build a trust score. And that's really the only thing that we're doing with the information is to build a trust score on this person, so that way we know that this person can actually send, or has the capability to actually send $1,000, or should we eventually stop this to go together. Now, if you look in the past, we use credit scores. I think credit scores are just old legacy technology. Whereas if I made a bad investment in real estate years ago, it can take 7 years to get off my credit. Whereas I can have plenty of money sitting in my bank account. So being able to leverage, through embedded finance and integrated partners, whether it be Plaid or MX, or so many others out there today, you can actually understand that this person actually has millions of dollars sitting in their account, or no money sitting in their account. So there's other things that you can go off of for decision making that's just not credit score. So everywhere has been a big player bringing our technology to the forefront to leverage more of a trust score versus a credit score.
So to that end, I think what you're kind of talking about as well is creating like a more accessible financial ecosystem, which I know is, I think where a lot of these companies exist. I think a lot of the main problems that we're solving. Are there examples? Are there, stories that any of you have from your particular customer base or that you're focusing on in the future in terms of making the world a better place, dare I say, with the products and with the capabilities that you're, building and selling every day?
Yes, and I guess putting my bigger Visa hat on, obviously massive company, but really it's like helping people with money everywhere in the world, and they have a lot of initiatives that they are building to try to bring more accessibility. I think personally, within Currency Cloud, our goal has always been to try to digitize like cross-border payments, right, and provide that accessibility on your phone, for example. Right now, we're not the ones actually building the app that is going to go to the end customer, but what we are doing is freeing up cool entrepreneurs to be able to build those types of accessible platforms, and we're helping support that infrastructure, right? So again, it's making it easier to actually build this type of an app and send money to friends and family overseas or access global bank accounts, et cetera, et cetera. So again, it's removing some of the barriers to help allow others to more easily move their money.
My head of product marketing is here, and we've been trying to figure this whole, what's our saying, don't be evil, increase the GDP of the internet. We don't have anything cool like that yet. But at the core of it, we're just here to service our customers and make their lives easier, and build really cool product and ideally make a lot of money. But we're going to try and sum that up into something cute and kitschy, but we're not there yet, so I don't know.
And for us, the long-term vision is that your phone number is your unique identifier, and it's already proven that it's more safer than a piece of plastic. So if I can give someone my credit card, they can pretty much use it anywhere because no one even asks for ID anymore. So for us, I believe that we're saving the world by not having a lot of plastic out there, and you're already seeing the value of there being more digital tokens than there are pieces of plastic. And the second is paper checks, and paper checks are going away, and everywhere we partner up with some of the largest medical billing paper statement companies in the world, and it's great because now they're texting versus printing pieces of paper that just sit on your desk or go unanswered and probably takes 3 or 4 more statements to get sent out. So we feel like we're making the world a better place by replacing plastic and paper.
Great answer. I actually have a question for you about the phone number piece, and forgive me if this is derailing us off FinTech a little bit, but I was reading this thing that said that phone numbers inherently, when they became a thing, were not meant to be shared, and that phone numbers were actually originally supposed to be this very private thing that wasn't in your email signature.
It's like a phone book. Remember back in the day, so they'll open up white pages and find everyone's phone number. Now it's gone.
So I wanted to ask for your customers, what does happen if, my phone number gets hacked with all the Google Voice phone numbers? How are you thinking about that as a potential risk and mitigating against it? I'm just genuinely curious.
Yeah, the very first thing that we do when you go to a check-in car, a shop-out experience, and you simply just type in your phone number. Behind the scenes, the very first lookup we do is saying, is this a cell phone number or a Google or a Twilio or a Voice or something other? How long it's been around? Who does it belong to? And immediately we'll come back and say, please enter a valid cell phone number if you put a Google VoIP line in. So understanding that it's a VoIP line versus an actual cell phone number, and then thirdly, well, who's the carrier behind the cell phone number? You know what I mean? That's also important too. So behind the scenes, we can again slow down a transaction. Again, if we don't recognize the carrier being one of the global big players, or if it's a phone number that is just spun up in a couple like days. And all that information is public information. You just don't know how to access it. And if you think about it too, I always get hit with, oh, what if somebody steals my SIM card? Well, better chance, what if you leave your card at the bar? Or what if you give your card online to a website? Or what if you give your card over the phone? You know, there's so many percentages that are way more higher than if somebody was to actually steal. They get in my phone and get my card somehow. I don't know how they do it, but there are ways, I guess. But yeah, but going all eSIM is the way to go.
Any other questions from the audience? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just wondering, with Silicon Valley Bank, does that ripple out into the fintech world and your industry, like as a negative, or maybe it's a positive and it's showing need for more diversification, or like what are your initial thoughts on that?
Well, my initial thoughts is hopefully my funds are available soon because I'm all frozen. I can't use my credit card. And I say that if anything, it taught me as an entrepreneur that to spread the money out because the 250,000 is almost a joke. You know, it really is. And it's great to see the government actually step in, but it just shows that you really can't have all your eggs in one basket, but just about anything in life.
I mean, the 250 hasn't even been adjusted for inflation, right? So, yeah, the SVB thing sucks. There are positives for our business that we're gonna try and take advantage of, but like those could potentially just be short-term positives, meaning like from a long-term perspective, I don't know how it's gonna affect fundraising. Something that nobody's really talking about is all of the sort of dry powder that just disappeared from the perspective of debt that Silicon Valley Bank had issued to everybody, basically like whoever had money at their bank. That really sucks. So I think like, yeah, we may benefit, but we may not benefit in like 12 months. It may really suck. So we'll see what happens.
I think it's yet to be seen, obviously, right? We don't know to the extent this will permeate into the industry going further. However, obviously, it's a really, really painful time. A lot of our customers are in a lot of pain right now. That being said, if I'm going to take the positive route on this one, in terms of potential upside, I think there's been a debate in the industry for a long time, sort of fintechs versus banks. And like the ironic part of that is, of course, fintechs and banks partner all the time, but it's so painful. Like, I mean, we've heard so many stories about, the banks being like moving too slow, and then the fintechs being like, why don't they understand what I'm trying to do? But at the end of the day, like, I think it's a good thing because maybe it wakes up the tech industry to understand the fundamentals of banking and how all of this actually unfolds and like how the business works and vice versa, like, getting more banks to understand the tech side. It has always been, what we're trying to work on within this industry. So taking the positive route here, long term, maybe it really helps us better understand the fundamentals of the banking business and building better businesses going forward and better managing those businesses.
I would say that definitely helps the big major banks out. Like, for instance, I have a 23-year-old son. He could care less about Chase or, Bank of America or Wells Fargo. Maybe he was on Chime or some other like online bank where now he's like, wait a minute, I have to go to like Chase Bank, right? Or Bank of America, because those are the most trustworthy banks. And I think that they were almost becoming irrelevant where everyone was scrambling to like, neobanks are just now blooming everywhere. Everyone's becoming a bank. Whereas now everyone's going to be taking a step back and saying, you know what? I'm going to go into and open up a Bank of America account versus some new neobank that's spun up.
Let's just hope that's a short-term thing, because I think the diversification of our banking industry in the U.S. is so unique and important for stability. So let's hope it's just kind of like a short-term scare, sort of like the way people buy into gold when things are a little scary, right? But like, I think at the end of the day, like, we know how the big banks are very important and great what they do in a lot of ways, but what we know when they service small businesses, oftentimes there's a lack of flexibility, right? Because they just have so many customers to service, and oftentimes they're not able to get the funding they need or that personalized service. So I guess if I were to provide encouragement to the entire industry is like, yes, I know it's a scary time and do what you got to do for your own business, but let's just see how it all pans out, and let's try to remember that the diversification of banking in the U.S. is very important.
It's to even shorten that, the SVB, the PacWest, the FRBs, like all those guys, like for startups, they cared about us. Whereas like if we move our funds B of A or Chase or whatever, like, I mean, they may have like a small tech banking sector, but they don't care, right? Like their customers are Wall Street, they're the Fortune 100. And so, yeah, like I really hope that's not the case. But yeah, they care about it.
So do you feel, Larry, like there is a risk here that all of these Chimes and Robinhoods and very mainstream fintech apps of the world are now going to have folks like your son move all their money out into Bank of America? Or do we think he's going to keep his account, he and the proverbial everyone, and just add a Bank of America like next to it versus instead of it? I'm curious actually all your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to shut it down, but like, I'm just using my son as an example because, one of the ways he makes money is by promoting different stocks to go after each morning to his followers. And, one of the things that he's talking about is, obviously the banking system and where to invest money. And, he's now promoting more or less, the traditional banking system over the newer, fintechs that are coming up. And so I see that, that there's definitely, maybe it's short term, but it's definitely going to be played out over this next year, where the younger generation is going to be looking more to open up a traditional banking account, I believe, versus a neobank. I think there's going to be this short-term shift, and maybe it'll flip that.
Any other questions from the audience? If not, I've got one last one. For 2023, if you could assign it one word, in your opinion, not so far, but come December, the word you think that would describe your 2023, what word would it be and why?
Change. Yeah, I can explain why. I think for my own personal journey at the moment, right? Talking about fintech startup acquired by a big company, as I was talking about before, lots of change, but also the industry. And I think that's a good thing. Like, I think change is a little scary right now, but what it is doing is it's putting eyeballs onto the industry in a deeper way. It's forcing certain regulation, I think, right? It's creating playbooks for like how this is all supposed to work out, and like providing more, like, this industry is pretty close as it is, but I think people were all testing stuff for the first time. So now we have a little bit of roadway behind us. We can look back and say, okay, what worked and what didn't? So change is my word.
I was gonna do a saying, but this is like live, so I don't want to say it. But like, you guys know the saying, right? Like the guy on the whiteboard, walk around, find out. Yeah, that's like my sum up for 2023. I think that yeah, if you just think about it like that, that's what 2023 is going to be, and it can be good or bad. I'm leaning more towards good, but yeah.
And for me, I would go with the word balance. And what I mean by that is that, the pendulum, can't go one way all the way and the other way all the time. Everything would be too extreme or too negative. But finding that right about the balance, and whether it's in your personal life, it's always about balance, but in business, you have to find the balance, right? The happy medium. And I believe that with interest rates, gone way up the last 2 years, there was tons of dry powder or tons of cash out there, where you're seeing now that pendulum swing back the other way. In the houses market, and everything, they're starting to come back down again to be reasonable. It's about finding balance. And I think 23 was a year to really get that balance worked out, where you just don't have these extreme, atmospheric rivers flowing through, so to speak.
Cool. Well, thank you all. Larry, Colton, Kara, really appreciate having you. Let's give them a round of applause. I appreciate you all coming out to the FinTech Fortress. We've got tons of sandwiches, breakfast, tacos, sodas, beer, wine, you name it. Feel free to stick around, walk around, find out. Thanks so much for coming.